understanding formative assessment and working to better implement it in my classroom. Susan Brookhart and Connie Moss explain in their book, Advancing Formative Assessment in Every Classroom, that teachers often believe they are already implementing formative assessment. They say that they already do this, or they just call it something else. Connie Moss and Susan Brookhart state that without a clear understanding of what it takes to implement all of the elements of the formative assessment process in the day-to-day and minute-by-minute work of the classroom, it is common for teachers to assume that they are already doing formative assessment at the highest levels of quality and consistency. This misunderstanding has led me to question the degree to which I am implementing and using formative assessment in my classroom. Connie Moss and Susan Brookhart lay forth a plan, a Phase 2 teacher reflection that asks teachers action questions to help them determine what level of practice they are using formative assessment in their classroom. Their action questions have set the foundation for my research. Specifically, am I using research-driven formative assessment in my daily routine? Do I intentionally collect, analyze, and use the information about my teaching and its effect on student learning? Are my students actively involved in assessing and regulating their own learning? Is formative assessment guiding the instructional decisions I make and helping move students towards mastery of the learning objectives? And how does formative assessment guide my conversations with students, parents, teachers, and administrators about student learning and their achievement in my classroom? To begin with, I started with looking at a definition for formative assessment. In the book, Advancing Formative Assessment in Every Classroom, Connie Moss and Susan Brookhart state that formative assessment is an active and intentional learning process that partners the teacher and the students to continuously and systematically gather evidence of learning with the express goal of improving student achievement. Laura Greenstein states that formative assessment is the process of uncovering and understanding what students know in order to determine the best path for learning. James Potham, in his book Transformative Assessment, starts by explaining the Council of Chief State School Officers has laid the definition of formative assessment as the process used by teachers and students during instruction that provides feedback to adjust ongoing teaching and learning to improve students' achievement of intended instructional outcomes. He then goes on to explain that he likes an easier definition that is more succinct, and he uses the definition that formative assessment is a planned process in which assessment-elicited evidence of student status is used by teachers to adjust their ongoing instructional procedures, or by students to adjust their current learning tactics. He then again states this phrase as formative assessment is a planned process in which teachers or students use assessment-based evidence to adjust what they are currently doing. So what can we determine from all of these definitions? Formative assessment is an active, ongoing process. It includes both teachers and students. It provides feedback for students and teachers about learning. The data and the feedback that is gathered from formative assessment needs to be used to help teachers individualize instruction for students, and for students to help them individualize their learning plans, create goals, and self-assess their learning. So where do we need to start? From my research, I have determined that I have the most work to do in utilizing pre-assessments. Connie Moss and Susan Brookhart state that the first step is being clear about learning objectives and goals. They explain that pre-assessment is extremely important for identifying information that students have already learned. Pre-assessment also helps activate students' prior knowledge and cognitively prepare students for learning. Pre-assessment before instruction determines students' incoming skill levels, knowledge, and misunderstandings. It can show the depth of current student knowledge, and it can help determine students' present attitudes, dispositions, and beliefs about a topic. This can guide teachers in planning and can help identify the gaps between the current level of knowledge and the desired level of learning achievement. So the biggest reason to implement pre-assessment is to prepare students for learning. In their book, Nancy Fisher and Douglas Fisher and Nancy Fry explain that a vital aspect of the teaching and learning cycle is feeding up, their version of pre-assessment, to establish purpose and to increase motivation and set goals. So what are some different formative assessment techniques that teachers can use prior to instruction? One technique is to have students fill out an entrance slip. Students write a response to a teacher-generated question on a slip of paper. The teacher can then review the answers to the questions privately, or they can share them with the whole class. They can also share them with the entire class anonymously to start discussion. Entrance slip questions relate to upcoming learning. Corners is an activity in which the teacher labels various corners of the classroom with disagree, agree, and unsure or other relevant labels, and then reads a statement and asks students to go to the corners that best represents their response. All the students, sharing a similar point of view, work together to collect evidence and present an argument supporting their belief. In a gallery assessment, students make a display of their knowledge or beliefs. They can create these individually or make a common display or a graffiti wall. Sticky notes is an activity where students take a sticky note and they write what they know or what they would like to learn on the note. They can then classify these notes and decide to work together to determine which notes and which ones go together, which ones are different, and which ones have the most similarities. Formative assessment during instruction is also important because it helps teachers and students review and reflect on students' progress towards the mastery of learning objectives. Laura Greenstein explains that assessing during instruction allows you to customize the teaching to match the current learning needs of your students in the classroom. There are many different techniques for using formative assessment during instruction. Teachers can use voting cards. The voting cards are simple cards that students can use to signal degrees of understanding. Typically, teachers give each student a set of colored cards, and then during instruction, the teacher asks students to use their cards to show their response to teacher statements. When students agree with a statement, they hold up a green card. When they disagree, they hold up a red card. If they're unsure, they hold up a yellow card. During reflect and apply, students think about what they have learned, they reflect about it, and then they reply with a question of something they would like to learn more about. Fingers up is an easy way for students to indicate their degree of understanding on a scale of 0 to 5 by holding up the number of fingers that corresponds with their level of understanding. Bump in the road is an activity where students they write down from the lesson what they found confusing, a skill, a concept that they find difficult. The teachers can then collect the responses to review, or they can form small groups and ask students to share their bumps and seek clarification. If everyone has the same problem, the group shares it as a whole class. One way that Laura Greenstein, James Popham, and Susan Brookhart and Connie Moss have decided is best for including formative assessment is for teachers to directly plan for formative assessment as they're developing a lesson. Through building formative assessment into the lesson plans, the teacher can also decide how they're going to collect and use the data. They then can use the collected data to work with students to set goals. Setting goals is a very important part of the formative assessment process. Students start by describing specific short-term goals that are within their zone of proximal development. Next, students select a strategy that will help them advance and achieve their goal. Students use self-assessment and regulating techniques to monitor and adjust what they're doing. Teachers need to help support and promote goal setting using feedback that informs students and allows them to see where they are and where they need to go. Teachers should also help by modeling goal setting and providing students with goal setting guides. By including goal setting within their lesson plans and frequent progress checks for students to gauge their learning and encouraging students to revise and resubmit assignments, teachers can help ensure that goal setting is an ongoing process throughout instruction. Formative assessment after instruction can be used to determine if students are ready for the summative assessment. Post-instruction formative assessment can be used to help students reflect on their tests and determine if they have true misunderstandings. This can also help develop a future work plan, address careless errors, address concepts that are unclear, and students can graph their test results on a reflection sheet. This will also help teachers decide if they need to change or adjust what is currently on the summative assessment. Activities for post-instruction formative assessment include exit tickets, most clear and least clear cards, nutshelling, 3-2-1, ball toss, question-answer mix-up, and grab bag. In 3-2-1, students write 3 key terms related to what they know or have learned, 2 questions they have, and 1 way they can apply their learning. With the ball toss, the teacher gives the ball to a student and asks the question. The student can answer the question and toss the ball to a student of his choice who will answer the next question, or he can decide not to answer the question and toss the ball. The teacher allows the students only a set number of passes on questions. Teacher-generated and student-generated questions can be used. Formative assessment can also be used for students to help in peer assessment and self-assessment. In muddiest point, students name or describe the concept they have the least understanding of or their muddiest point. Students can share their muddiest points with the class, or the teacher can collect them and review them privately. In a journaling activity, students just write thoughts about their journals and reflect on their learning. Stars and Wishes is an activity where students write down 2 things that they really like and 1 thing they wish would be different. So the teacher for the students identify 2 things they especially liked about another student's work and 2 significant things they learned about it. They then make 1 wish for improvement. Using formative assessment to inform instruction is important because it helps teachers determine when adjustments need to be made it determines when teachers need to make adjustments in instruction. A key point to this is that when we reteach the material, it needs to be taught in a different way from the first time what we presented the material. Changing the summative assessment. Laura Greenstein explains that the point of the summative assessment is to get the best, most accurate measure of student learning. For this reason, we have the option of making adjustments or changing the summative assessment to increase the odds that the test will support a valid conclusion about what students know and can do. We can also allow students choice in their assessment and work to make assessment more relevant by asking students to apply their knowledge in performance assessments or performance tasks instead of taking a regular traditional test. So, in answer to my research questions, am I using research-driven formative assessment in my daily routine? Yes, but I have learned that there are many more ways I can utilize and include formative assessment in my current practices. I have also discovered that I need to work harder to incorporate pre-instruction formative assessment into my classroom routine. And I have come to realize that an assessment is only formative if I actually use the collected data to inform, guide, and adjust my instruction. Do I intentionally collect, analyze, and use the information about my teaching and its effect on student learning? I do intentionally collect, analyze, and use the information about my teaching and its effect on student learning. What I would like to do now is start having students collect and analyze their information to inform them of their learning goals and to help them make instructional goals. I would also like to start creating more individualized learning plans with my students to actively engage them in their learning. Are my students assessing and regulating their own learning? Well, students do a lot of assessing and regulating in their reading when they're choosing their own independent reading books. I would like to extend the amount of independent assessment and regulation students are doing in math and science. Is formative assessment guiding the instructional decisions I make and helping move students towards mastery of the learning objectives? Formative assessment is guiding my instructional decisions. What I have learned is that there are additional formative assessment techniques I have never tried that I am excited to try now. I've also learned that formative assessment needs to be a continuous, ongoing, cyclic process throughout my instruction. And how is formative assessment guiding the instructional decisions I make and helping move students forward? And how does formative assessment guide my conversations with students, parents, and other teachers and administrators regarding student learning and achievement in my classroom? When discussing student progress and mastery of learning, I frequently use student journals, graphic organizers, and other indicators as conversation starters and guides to discuss student learning and progress. What I would like to do is incorporate more student self-reflection and assessment reflection into my routine to help incorporate students in the conversation about their progress and mastery of learning objectives. The resources I used for this presentation include the Formative Assessment Action Plan by Douglas Fisher and Nancy Fry, book What Teachers Really Need to Know About Formative Assessment by Laura Greenstein, Advancing Formative Assessment in Every Classroom, A Guide for Instructional Leaders by Connie Moss and Susan Brookhart, and Transformative Assessment by James Popham. I think I finished.